Right, guys. So welcome to the latest edition of the podcast. I did actually originally have someone else lined up for today, and then a few things changed there. So I've had a few people suggest recently that they might be interested in hearing my story, hearing about what I have done prior to the academy, my experience as Chief Ninja of the academy, and what have you. And I posted that in the group, and it did seem that there was interest in it. So we've had Jamie and Lee, two of the academy members, have very kindly volunteered to conduct the grilling. They've got their own questions, which I haven't seen, and they've also had a series of questions that have been submitted by members and non-members. I did have some very interesting questions from a non-member earlier who clearly mistook me for somebody else, because his list of questions included: why did I join the army? How long did I spend in there? Why did I... So I replied and said, I think you've got the wrong John, which he did. So they've got a number of questions to go through. And other than that, they're just going to freestyle it a little bit. But I'll hand you now over to Lee and Jamie, who will conduct the interview, the podcast on me. Good evening, boys. How are we doing?
Good evening. How are you?
Evening. Very well. Very well.
Yeah, so thanks for asking us along. It's an honour and a privilege. So just to give you the format, so I'm going to go through probably the general sort of stuff that you go through when you're conducting a podcast. So a bit of a backstory of John, bring us up to where we are today. And then Jamie's got his own list of more fun questions, and also the any questions that have been posted in the group or sent to you by email. So if we just start at the beginning, John, so there was what, 50 or 60 years leading us up to where we are today of Jon Hall. So
approximately. That's my dad you're thinking of. That's the original Jon Hall. That's 72 years. I'm only 40, believe it or not.
Yeah, just give us a brief history of Jon Hall. Maybe bring us up to, say, your university years.
Okay, cool. So I was born right at the start of 1980. I'm an 80s child like Jamie is, not a 70s child like your good self, Lee. I lived for the first 6 years of my life in a town called Belper in Derbyshire. My dad was a farmer over there. My mum, well, she wasn't teaching at the time. She was on, she didn't teach for a number of years with my sister being born and then me going to school, but she was, in theory, a teacher. We lived there until just after my 6th birthday. Don't remember a massive amount of it. I remember breaking my arm. I remember my dad's van getting stolen. I remember the van getting found, dumped in a pond. I vaguely remember the school I went to at that point, which was run by nuns. So I was first taught by nuns, believe it or not.
Wow.
But then just after my 6th birthday, we moved to the place where I consider I grew up. I lived there from the age of 6 to 14. A really fantastic place to grow up. My dad got the contract, whatever you call it, to be the estate farmer for a private estate near Ashbourne. It's called Osmaston Park. You can Google it now, actually, and find a lot of information about it, because it's been now run weddings and other events there. But at the time, it was just 360 acres on which there was me, my parents and my sister. And then there's a house next door where the landowner's sister and mother lived. And that was it. So I had in that park, I had a sawmill, a couple of lakes, a campsite, about 3 miles of private road I could drive my go-kart on. I built a couple of different tree houses, had barns and stuff I could go and climb on and play in. I used to make dens out of bales, so my dad would be storing all the straw bales in one of the barns, and as he was putting them in with the JCB, I would build in like wooden rooms inside it. Unbeknownst to him, I'd be putting like massive 4x8 sheets of wood in, so that it left a room gap in the middle of these, probably, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 bales would be in there, but there'd be a series of corridors and rooms built into it. It's an idyllic childhood, to be honest. Amazing.
Sounds like fun now.
It does, yeah, that'd be awesome.
So suddenly, the secret room seems so obvious now.
So that's the one thing I didn't have back then. I remember there was in my bedroom, there was what had once been a fireplace that was boarded up, so you couldn't see anything, but you could tap on it and you could hear that it wasn't solid wall behind it. And I always used to dream that was my door to my secret room, and that there was something behind there. There clearly wouldn't have been. There'd have been about a foot of space, but nothing really. So that's maybe where that came from. But like I said, an idyllic childhood. Absolutely loved it. Really lucky. I had a go-kart that me and my friends used to drive around on. Used to do time trials. Me and my sister would take it in turns to drive down to the sawmill and back. We used to store the canoes for the scout group that I was part of. So I used to be able to take the canoes out on the lake. I used to go canoeing on the lake all by myself. There used to be as well a secret garden. So in the estate grounds, there used to be a manor house, Osmaston Manor House, which I only Googled it relatively recently and read the history of it. At one point, it was considered the most technologically advanced house in the world. It had like mains, water and electricity many years before most places did. At that point, there was nothing there. They'd knocked it down. They knocked it down in about 1966, I think, which was before my time, believe it or not, Lee. But they'd got a secret garden. And my dad found it after a few years of being the farmer there. I'd heard it was there, but didn't know where it was. And it was down this little overgrown cut through around the back of what would have been the manor house. And you walked into a large stone room, essentially. There was no roof on it. It used to have a glass roof, a bit like a greenhouse. But a large stone room. It was like something out of Chronicles of Narnia. There was like an altar type thing in the middle, alcoves around the side. And I used to build stuff and play in there. An amazing childhood. We moved when I was 14 to the opposite side of the village, to a different farm, which is nice, but not to the same degree, which is where my dad still lives now, 26 years later. My sister, brother-in-law, and their two kids moved in with him, my dad, 6 years ago now. So my sister and brother-in-law are in my old room. My nephew's in my sister's old room. My niece is in the old spare room stroke office. My dad's in the room. He's been in there for all that time. That was great as well. I loved it there. Got rid of the go-kart at that point because I think I was getting too tall for it anyway, but also the little bit of track and road we had there wasn't really conducive to it. It was more just driving up and down rather than doing laps. And I think I'd moved on at that point. Obviously finished off school while I was there, did my GCSEs and A-levels, and then headed off to uni in 1998.
Any favourite particular subjects at high school?
Yeah, I was always, at that point, I really liked stuff where there was a right or wrong answer. So things like maths, physics, design technology I liked. At that point, my intention had been, when I was older, to work in engineering or design. I think I thought at that point that there's an innovations company called 3M who made a lot of new products and stuff. They're still around as far as I'm aware. I kind of got in my head that something along those lines was the kind of thing I ended up doing. And that's what started to shape my school choices. So I did an A-level maths, further maths, design, technology, physics, and I kind of did general studies. I didn't have to go to the lessons. I just turned up for the exam and still got a B.
Well, that does not surprise me. All right, so tell us about university then. Let us up nicely there.
Yes, I finished finished A-levels. Didn't quite get the grades I wanted, actually. I was disappointed. I made a couple of errors. I got an A in maths, which I was expected, B in general studies. I only got a C in physics, which I was disappointed at. I was predicted an A. And I actually got E's in further maths and design technology. The E in further maths wasn't massively unexpected. I found the difference between maths and further maths a bit of maybe a step too much for me. The design technology one was disappointing. Partly I'd messed up my coursework. I went in on, it would have been the Monday after, I guess, the Easter holidays. I went into my design technology lesson and the teacher said, right, have you all got your final, whatever it was, project work? And I was like, I thought we'd got like a month still on this. He went, no, it's due now. So I had to go home and finish off my entire project in one day. So I think that was worth 40% of the final grades. I probably dropped a very significant amount from that. But still, at this point, I've only got an E. I didn't quite get the points I needed to get. I'd applied for 6 universities in total, and my first choice was Nottingham, second choice Loughborough. I was 2 points short of what Nottingham needed, but I think must have done all right in the interview, because by the time I rang them, but I didn't even ring them. By the time I got my results, they'd already been in contact with the school and said, I can still come. I'd still got the place. So that was a relief. Went there September 1998. There's in halls of residence at Nottingham campus, and all boys halls of residence. It was the final year that there was 2 all-male halls. There was Hugh Stew, which was my hall, which is where all the cool guys went. And then there was Crips next door, which was where just that's where the public school boys and whatever went. That's definitely not the case in my halls.
Trendy boys.
The what boys?
The trendy boys.
Well, that was one way to look at it. Yeah, yeah. They used to come around and set our fire alarm off in the middle of the night because that's apparently hilarious.
Yeah.
Sounds hilarious.
It was. Yeah, it's funny when we did it to them, but not so much when they did it to us. One of those sorts. I've just realised, foolishly, I'm not recording the audio to this. This is exactly what I did with your podcast the other week, Jamie. So I'm now going to have to rip it off Facebook later, but that's fine. Very silly. Hall's residence in the first year. Second year, we lived in a house in Lenton in Nottingham. There was 8 of us. There was me and 3 other lads who I'm still friendly with to this day. They were at my 40th birthday party that you two came to. I had a Zoom catch up with them the other night. And 4 girls who I don't think they enjoyed living with us 4 boys, and to some degree vice versa. So in the third year, we went our separate way. I think one of the girls moved in with a boyfriend. The other 3 moved in with some of the guys that they knew through us, actually, and we moved into a considerably less nice house in a less nice part of Lenton. The house in the second year was really nice, a massive house, 8 fairly large bedrooms, huge dining room and kitchen. There's a bit of a party house. There's loads of space, and people would often start the evening at hours because it was top end of Lenton, near town, so you could carry on into Nottingham itself, and it was a big place. You could get 30, 40 people in. I'm not sure we ever got that many in, but you could in theory get there in no problems. The house in the third year was I think we'd left it a bit late to organise anything particularly good, and it was just one of the few places we could still find that had what we needed. But it was all good. I enjoyed my time there. Originally, I'd supposed to be doing 5 years at Nottingham. I'd signed up to do a master's in manufacturing engineering and operations management with a year in industry. I can't remember which round it was, but at some point I decided that I probably wasn't going to end up doing that. So I decided to drop both the master's and the year in industry. So drop down from 5 to 4 and then to 3 years, which did mean I couldn't graduate with the rest of my group because I was still considered a graduate in 2002, even though I finished up in 2001. And my final percentage I got was just below what is an official 2-1. So I was borderline 2-2-2-1. And I had to go back for a viva, like an oral, they say it's an exam, a chat or what have you, a year later to enable them to decide if I got the 2-1 or 2-2. So for a whole year, having finished at uni, I didn't actually know what result or what grade I'd got. But thankfully, I got the 2-1 in the end.
Oh, well done.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving on from that then, just pull up my list here. So obviously there's going to be a bit of gap in time here, but there's something that we both share a passion for, something we shared as children and still to this day. Although I think you got into it around the same time that I was getting out of it, and of course talk about American wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point between leaving university, tell us any sort of career opportunities you've considered and what led to.
Yeah, I remember watching wrestling as a kid. I remember sitting on my dad's knee, or I might have literally sat on his knee, but I remember watching it with him, watching Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks and all that sort of stuff. That went off ITV, I think it was just after I'd turned 8. I remember a few years later, I think it would have been April 92, maybe March, we'd gone to Centre Parks at Sherwood Forest. Me and my friend Jamie Revel, who I'm due to have a Skype catch-up with actually this week. My 2 best friends from primary school. I've not seen them in person for 8 years. Occasionally chat to them on the internet. We arranged to have a Skype catch-up, which would be nice. But anyway, me, my family, and Jamie Revel went to Centre Parks, flicking through the channels and came across WWF, as was then. The one thing I particularly remember from whatever episode we watched was The Undertaker getting his hand trapped in a coffin by Jake the Snake Roberts and dragging the coffin along, following probably for the rest of that year, probably didn't see or know much more about it. And I think later that year, probably late 92, WCW, which was the other main American promotion, started showing on ITV on, it would have been a Saturday afternoon. And I found a local shop on the way to Derby that sold a magazine called Superstars of Wrestling, which then 2 years later became Power Slam. And I brought every issue of that for the next 20 years. but then obviously fast forward then. So I enjoyed watching wrestling. Watched it quite a bit less when I went to uni. Didn't have Sky or anything like that at uni. Maybe check the results occasionally on the internet. But always at the back of my mind, I'd had that it was something that I'd quite like to have a go at. I never really thought I could or would, or that I'd be any good at it. And I kind of thought maybe something I'll just try, and if I'm rubbish at least I won't get to 30 or 40 years old and regret not trying it. And I remember, I always say it was at my 21st birthday, but I don't think it was actually at my birthday party, but around the time I turned 21, I remember thinking, if I don't give it a go soon, it's not going to happen. So having left uni and decided that I didn't want to work in engineering, I decided to become a professional wrestler, or at least give it a go.
It's the obvious choice.
It is the obvious choice. I think that's the hierarchy. I think it goes engineering, pro wrestler, personal trainer. I think that's how it works. So I looked around on the internet. At that point, there was only 3 wrestling schools in the whole of the UK. There was one down in Kent, which was called Hammerlock. There was one in Sheffield, which was the Hammerlock's Northern School. It only opened fairly recently. And there was one in Stoke, funnily enough, which is actually very close to Ashbourne, where I lived. But when I looked at their website, it didn't massively appeal to me. The shows they did seem to include a large element of hardcore wrestling, sort of blood and guts style. Now, actually, fast forward a few years, when I was wrestling regularly, I'd met a number of the guys that had come through their training school and realised actually it was I don't necessarily know the quality of the school, but the fact that it turned out some of those guys suggested it would have been absolutely fine. But I decided on Sheffield because it just, from what I could see on the website, it seemed to be more actually teaching you how to wrestle. And randomly, I just started working at Fitness First in Derby at that point. I decided, because I wasn't in any sort of shape whatsoever, I was 16 stone 10 when I graduated university. I'm not a good 16 stone 10 either. I decided that starting to work in the fitness industry would both enable me to get in better shape, give me more knowledge and what have you about it, but also be something I could do as I tried to have a go at the wrestling. But I met a member there by complete coincidence called Carl, who lived in Derby but drove up to Sheffield every weekend to learn how to wrestle. And he told me he went to this wrestling school. I just asked him a few questions about it, just in general conversation, and it sounded like it would work. So unbeknownst to absolutely everyone, I moved to Sheffield for that very reason. It'd come up, I think, at the Fitness First newsletter or bulletin that they were opening a new club in Millhouses, which is the southern part of Sheffield, and they needed personal trainers there. So I applied for that, went for the interview, got one of the 3, I think it was, roles at that point. I lived with my nana and grandpa, who lived near Chesterfield, for a week, the first week that the club opened, whilst I sorted out some accommodation to live in there. I started going to the wrestling school up near Hillsborough Barracks. There's a place called the 393 Club. It was a fairly old, somewhat dilapidated martial arts club. Holes in the roof and the windows. Turned up on day one, and Carl, the guy who I knew from Fitness First at Derby, I remember him double taking me, like, what's he doing here? And yeah, they taught me to a large degree how to wrestle. The instruction was relatively basic, but it definitely was the basics in terms of actually learning how to do it to a level where you could then go on to wrestle elsewhere and further improve your skill set. And like I said, I never thought I'd be particularly good at it, but for whatever reason I was. I think I don't know, because I enjoyed it and cared about it and wanted to give it a good go, I took to it relatively quickly. I remember on about my 3rd or 4th lesson, there was me and a couple of the guys, one of whom I'm still fairly friendly with. I messaged him a couple of days ago, who just started at the same time. And Alan, the guy who took the lesson, said about how I seemed to be getting it quicker than others. So I was quite pleased with that. I started training there sort of in early February. And by June the 8th, 2003, they decided I was ready for my first match. I think, if I remember correctly, actually, there should have been a show the previous month in the May that was then cancelled, and I was actually penciled in to be on that. So in theory, they thought I was ready after 3 months. But June the 8th, 2003, I had my first match at the Warthioff Leisure Centre in Sheffield. A few weeks prior to that, I'd been in Meadowhall with my mum. We'd met up for a bit of shopping and a bit of lunch, and I revealed to her that the reason I moved to Sheffield was because I wanted to become a professional wrestler.
That was my next question.
I was waiting to ask that question. Like, how did you go from engineering degree at university to wearing pink shorts?
Well, I didn't wear pink shorts at that point. They weren't
Okay.
pink. At that point, I was
one thing about it.
So she was surprised, obviously. She told me afterwards she thought I was going to tell her that either I was gay or I'd got someone pregnant. Or both, maybe. Just to rewind though, at that point, my first match, I actually wore some, what were they? Adidas shorts, because I'd ordered some shorts from America, from highspots.com, and they hadn't arrived. They arrived in time for my third match. So my first 2 matches, I just wore some like standard, but like wrestling-y size type shorts. Match went well. I was told afterwards by Alan that it was the best match on the show, which me and this guy Matt, it was our first match. So for us to have the best match on the show, I was pleased with that. I was contacted straight afterwards by a guy called Will, who ran another promotion in Sheffield, and he'd come along to watch, to say he wanted, out of everyone there that day, to book me and a guy called Mark Mignot. He wrestled as he got a French gimmick, and he was the champion for that promotion. He wanted to book us on their next show, which I thought was quite flattering. Some of the guys there had been wrestling for a couple of years. It was my first match, and he'd chosen that he wanted me and this other guy to appear in his show. I had another show for the first promotion in the meantime. Then my third match was for this other one, and it just kind of snowballed on from there.
So take it back, your physical condition had improved.
Yeah, I'd lost probably most of the weight. I probably lost quite a lot of the weight before I started working at Fitness First Derby. I think between leaving uni and actually finishing off my fitness qualifications, because to rewind a little bit there, actually, I had to obviously get qualified in the fitness industry. So I went down to Cambridge in February of 2002 for a 2-week intensive fitness instructor course. Stayed with friends of my parents who lived down there. He was MP for Cambridgeshire, actually, for many, many years.
Right.
Very sadly as well, just on a side note, that was the year before the Soham murders, and Soham was the next village. So I remember him being on TV and being interviewed about all that, but that's a side point. So I got my fitness instructor qualification there and started working at Fitness First Derby shortly afterwards, which was probably when I started to, by that point I probably lost all the body fat, I thought. I started to get in reasonable shape by that point, and I had 10 months working there. Just to take a step back before that, actually, as well. So between leaving uni and starting work at Fitness First at Derby, I'd looked and seen that the first fitness instructor courses that I could get on or that worked for me were the following February. And rather than just stay at my parents' house for the next however many months, I decided to go and stay in Dublin for a little while, like you do. I'd got a friend from uni who just started working there. I think he worked in banking at that point. I think he might work for the Bank of Ireland, if I remember correctly. So I one day got a train. I got several trains. Did I get a bus to Derby, a train to Manchester, a train to Liverpool, took the overnight ferry into Dublin, got a taxi to my mate's house. I think I crashed on the floor there. I think I stayed there one night. I think his housemates were away, if I remember correctly. And I'd said I was going to have a couple of nights there while I sorted out some accommodation. Then the next morning, he'd obviously gone off to work, and one of his housemates came back in early from whatever they'd been doing. So I pretty much immediately packed my bags, because I was asleep on the sofa at that point. Pretty much immediately packed my bags and went off to find somewhere to stay. And I found a hostel right in the town centre, just off the main street, O'Connell Street. And I stayed there for 3-4 months, I think it was. Got a job in the Royal Dublin Hotel as a bartender, which was cool. They have high expectations. The Irish of their bar staff. Everyone would walk in and just shout their orders at you. There'd be no queuing up to place your order. They'd just walk in and you'd have 20 people shouting orders at you. And then if they didn't have their drink in 2 or 3 minutes, there'd be questions as to why not. But it was good. They tipped well. It was Christmas time. I remember most shifts I'd earn, I can't remember what it was, but a reasonable amount on tips. I do remember as well that I used to wear a new shirt every single day, because I found a place around the corner that sold shirts. I think it worked out at £1.75 each. It was cheaper to buy a new one every day than it was to get them washed. So I turned up in a brand new white shirt every day. Anyway, I'm regressing there. So you probably want to ask some questions, actually. Let's keep talking.
Oh no, we're just moving along, right? Obviously, over the next few years, as somewhat the wrestling career starts taking shape and the
Yeah,
fitness.
so
Yeah,
I had my first handful of matches. The next however many matches were just for the few different promotions in Sheffield. I got booked for a company in Leeds, one in Manchester, did a few in Nottingham for a few different people, one in Lincoln. And then in December of 2003, I'd come to the realization, I didn't know this, but the same company that was on World of Sport for the last couple of years, so it wasn't joint promotions that had been on for decades. It was All-Star Promotions who had rotated with joint between 86 and 88 as being the shows that were on TV. That they were still going 15 years later. They'd never stopped. They hit quite a lull in the mid-90s, but they were still going, and they still ran fairly substantial shows on a regular basis. So I decided in my infinite wisdom that having had about 12, 13 matches at that point, I was good enough to wrestle for Europe's biggest and longest established wrestling promotion. So me and a few of the lads from Sheffield drove down to Victoria Halls at Hanley in Stoke. We watched the show there, and then no one else was willing to do it. So I walked up to Brian, the promoter, afterwards. Brian always used to work on the merchandise stand. He'd be there with his foam fingers going, "Get your foam fingers, £5, £5 a foam finger. Backstage passes, 2 for a tenner." So I went up to Brian and introduced myself. That's a terrible impersonation, that. Everyone who's ever wrestled in Britain has an impression of Brian, and mine's probably the worst. But I went up to Brian, I'd printed off little stat sheets about me and the other lads, so our names, the names we wrestled as, experience, our contact details and all that, and I gave them to Brian. He said, "Give me a call in the office on Monday morning." So we left with Brian's phone number. None of the other lads phoned him. I phoned him first thing Monday morning, and I don't know if it was that same week or maybe the week after. He said, "Can you get yourself to Skegness? But don't drive, because we don't need you to drive the whole route." And I was like, yeah. So I got another elaborate train. I walked into Sheffield City Centre, got the train, Sheffield down to Nottingham, Nottingham to Grantham, Grantham to Skegness. Took several hours, got to Skeggy. Brian had told me that the holiday camp, Butlins, I said, "Should I get a taxi or a bus?" And he said, "No, walk it, it's just around the corner." It was just around the corner, it was like 2.5 miles. So I walked down to Butlins. If I remember correctly, the show was the next day, so I met up with the guys, stayed overnight, and then that next day I had a match with a guy called Nathan, who I became good friends with. And then we drove down to Gravesend, and I got there, and I walked in, did a double take at the poster, because the poster had Gangrel, Jake the Snake Roberts, a few others on it, and in the little box where you could insert sort of custom text about the particular show, it said All-Star People's Champion Johnny Storm versus Sheffield's Johnny Midnight, which is me, obviously. And I was like, shit. Johnny Storm at that point was one of the UK's top wrestlers, a considerable distance above me in terms of experience and quality. And I knew straight away Brian was giving me a baptism of fire. It was day one on the job, put you in there with one of the very best and see how you get on. That match, unfortunately, didn't go very well. Johnny hurt his knee, completely nothing to do with me, just hurt his knee. So the match wasn't the best one, but it must have been all right, because I think we finished off that run. I think we did Minehead the next day. And then for the next few months, I think I've missed a step, actually. We did Rumbles for a little while, then that. Anyway, but then for the next few months, it was Rumbles at the odd show. I remember doing Grimsby and a few other places. But from April the following year, 2004, for the next couple of years, I was pretty much on the road with Brian and All-Star whenever they needed me. It was often Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday would be camps. So we'd do Skegness on Tuesday, we'd do Chelsea and Bognor on a Wednesday, Minehead on a Thursday, come back. I then have town shows on the Friday and Saturday night, probably either Skeggy or Bognor again on the Sunday. I'd personal train all day Monday, Tuesday morning, Friday daytime, Saturday morning if I could. And that was my life for the next couple of years, which was good.
Decent money?
No, not really. No, no. It's fine for the amount of time you're in the ring. You know, if you work out as an hourly rate, it's a hell of an hourly rate. But actually, you're out of the house for days on end sometimes. So, you know, if someone had ever said there's a tree in Bognor Regis that's got that amount of money, you can drive down and fetch it and get a kicking while you're down there, I'd have laughed at you. But I did it because, yeah, I enjoyed it. And it was a good experience. And like I said, the money was all right. It wasn't like it was bad money, you know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really, at that level, you're not doing it purely for the money. You're doing it because you enjoy it and you want to get on a little bit.
So have you got a copy of that first poster, or did you not think back then to...
I have, yeah. Not the poster itself, the flyer. I've got, it's down here somewhere in the basement where I am now.
Dig it out.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. So it's all good, yeah. So particularly at that point, I think I was single when I first started wrestling for All Star. I got together with my now ex-wife at that point, probably partway through that run. But particularly when you're young, free and single, or at least you're with someone, but actually it's not that far on. It was a good life. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, sounds fun. So obviously then at some point during your Fit Pro career with Fitness First and whoever else that you can tell us about, at some point which I don't actually know the story, but at some point you obviously meet Matt and start coming up with ideas.
Yes, I was fast forwarding several years now, that is. So 2003, 4, 5, I worked as a personal trainer at Fitness First.
Yeah.
Right at the end, like literally the week before the end of 2005, at that point, so I'd wrestled pretty much non-stop for Brian for the last 18 months. I can't remember if I applied for it, if I was just offered it. I think I was offered the job as fitness manager at the Hillsborough Fitness First. And if I remember correctly as well, I said I'd take on the studio manager role as well. So rather than paying for 2 proper wages, they paid me time and a third or whatever it was. So between that, the wrestling and a little bit of personal training, that was a substantial actually increase in what I've been making financially before. So I did that for the next 11 months or so. Then I was made the manager of the Fitness First back at Millhouses, the one that I'd been a personal trainer at, which was an adjustment for a lot of the staff and members because they'd last seen me as a personal trainer. And then less than a year later, they just thought I'd gone. And I was back then as club manager in charge of the whole club. I did that for about a year, left number of reasons. I'd got a regional business manager who was my boss essentially, who I didn't really get on with and like. I didn't like his methods to try and motivate me were just to threaten me with a sack every time he spoke to me, pretty much. I'm probably exaggerating slightly, but it felt like that. So I was in negotiations at that point to buy a gym in Hallisage in North Derbyshire. At that point, let me think about this. Would Ollie have been born? No, Ollie hadn't been born. We were either expecting him or children were on the cards anyway, and we'd started to think about moving out into the countryside. So we looked at buying Valley Health Club. That fell through. That was a real pain, actually. I went back and forth for months, and then we pulled out in the end, having, by that point, I'd worked my notice, not earned for a couple of months, spent several thousand on solicitors' fees, and ended up with nothing from that, which is somewhat annoying. So we had moved out at that point? No, we'd moved out of our old house in Sheffield. I'd moved in next to my in-laws, also in Sheffield. They'd got an old, almost like a barn conversion attached to their house that they'd been doing up. So we lived in there for a little while. I got a job as the area manager for Fitness Agents. They ran the personal training brand, probably still do as far as I know, for a number of health club chains such as JJB as was then, DW Sports Fitness as is now, LA Fitness, Fitness First, Top Notch, MeFit, FitSpace. I got the job as Northeast area manager for them, running the personal training brand in a number of clubs. I think it was probably about 10 or 12 clubs to start with. And by the time I finished, I think I got 22, if I remember correctly. And we then moved out to near Bakewell, into the house that Ollie and Jamie, my 2 oldest sons, still live at half the week. So yeah, I lived there. Ollie it was a few days before his first birthday when we moved there. Jamie was born there. Jamie's only ever lived in that house and obviously the ones with me. Did the area manager role for 2 years. Really enjoyed that. It was a lot of travel. In the end, my region ran from Macclesfield. Funnily enough, I inherited Macclesfield about 3 months before I finished, through to Newcastle and Oldham across to Hull and everything in between. So quite a lot of driving around, which was, again, okay, it was fine, but not necessarily what I wanted to do for 30 years until I retired.
Yeah.
I'd come to the realization actually that some of the PTs I was managing were making as much, if not more, than I was. And I felt confident that with my existing skills as a PT and what I'd learned as an area manager, because I was also, training a lot of these PTs, particularly in how to generate business, I felt confident that I could go back into PTing and earn that same amount of money, but with more flexible hours and less traveling. So I gave myself one of the roles at DW at Macclesfield, because the person that would have interviewed me would have been me. I just handed my notice in and said I'm starting at DW in Mac. Started there, so that was back doing one-to-one personal training for the first time on a regular basis for 4 years. At that point, I'd been in fitness management. I'd also decided as well that's more what I enjoyed, actually, rather than helping other fit pros with their clients. I actually probably preferred working with my own clients.
Yeah.
So I started working at DW there in early 2012. Is that right? No, early 2010, sorry, early 2010. And that was only 6 months after we'd moved into the new house near Bakewell. Around the back of the garage there was a studio the previous owner had built. It was essentially an artist's studio, but it had a solid wooden floor and plenty of space in it. I did that up to be a personal training studio, put some mirrors on the wall, much like the mirrors that are down at the academy, brought some kettlebells, TRX, some basic weights, and I started on the same day running Peak Fitness, as I called that one, because it was in Peak District, and personal training at DW in Mac. It was always the intent to get the Peak Fitness studio being the main thing, but I knew that I could get a business and a client database or what have you built up a lot quicker in a gym. So I was pretty much fully booked within a couple of weeks at DW at Mac, whereas the studio out there, it was still growing to the point that I wanted it to be when I then had to shut it down a year and a half later, when my wife, as was then, and I separated. I moved out to a flat in Buxton above the Eagle, roughest pub in Buxton it turned out to be, but I didn't realise that when I moved in there. So I moved in there, started working at DW, met Matt about a year later, I think it would have been. I think Matt would have started there probably January 2011, if I remember correctly. And we separated and I had to close the studio in September 2011. And I never just wanted to be an in-club PT, and again, not for 30 years till I retired. So I was planning straight away on doing something else, setting something else up. And I remember in conversation with Matt, he had said he was thinking about setting a boot camp up in Buxton. And because I was living in Buxton at that point, I'd been thinking about setting something up there as well. So I thought, rather than us being in competition, potentially made sense for us to work together. So I invited him round for a beer and a chat at the flat in Buxton one evening in, would have been late 2011, and we just pretty much agreed straight away to do something together.
Wow. Of course, we're all grateful that you did. So how early on did you bring in kind of like the idea behind the whole ninja system and the point system and the Black Panther, all those kind of ideas?
Yeah, so they'd have evolved over time. So I think we just registered the company straight away. We opened up the one in Buxton at the start of February 2012. That's one of the things that Matt and I connected over straight away. We were both very decisive. When we agreed on something, we just made it happen immediately. Probably the prime example of that is several months after that, when we decided to set the club up at Mac. We'd looked at a few places, and then I found it was a Tuesday, on Rightmove, I saw the details of Unit 7 Waterside Mill, where we still are now. I think I messaged Matt. I think I'd gone round to Alex, my now wife's house that evening. We just started dating probably a few months, maybe 8 or 9 months before. And I told her about this place that I'd seen and said I was going to call about it tomorrow on the Wednesday. And then on the Wednesday night, I went back to hers again, and she said, "Did you call about that place?" And said, "Yeah, we've been and seen it. We've agreed a 3-year lease." So Matt and I are very much on the same wavelength in that respect. And a lot of the things that we got set up, yeah, we just, as soon as we mentioned it, we were in agreement and just got it done. So we opened up the Buxton Club, the Mac Club at the start of September 2012. Had them both for a couple of years. The Buxton one didn't work out long term, but we, in the meantime, had developed a number of the systems there. So the Ninja band system was Matt's idea initially. He was more into, obviously he's come into his boxing more recently, but martial arts and things like that. I can't remember exactly what he'd done, but in his youth he'd done some martial arts. Was, you know, aware of the belting and grading system, and had the idea to do an equivalent version of that, which obviously involved wristbands in our case. So we implemented that. I would guess that would have been mid 2013. We'd have implemented that. And then the rest of the ideas kind of just all came bit by bit. It was an evolution. You know, to start with, it was just us running a group personal training session in what is now the academy, but was a much more basic looking version of it at that point. All the walls were white. We had fairly minimal amounts of equipment. And it just grew over time.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was just looking through my list then. There was a couple of bits I was going to talk about the academy a bit more, but then realised that's more the academy and not necessarily you on a personal level. Just one last bit from me then before I hand over to Jamie. I know time's getting away a bit. Obviously, if we jump straight forward to the months leading up to your 40th birthday, as most people are probably aware, Jamie and I essentially got you into the best shape of your life.
We did. I'll forever appreciate it.
So just just talk us through when you decided you wanted to achieve that goal, what the thought behind it was, the mental effort, the physical effort.
So I've always been up for setting goals. More and more over the last few years. I work with a coach now, a guy called Paul Moore, I know you both are aware of, and a number of people might have seen a lot of his stuff there. I've been on his Unstoppable program now for approaching 3 years. I think I signed up for it, the first one in September 2017. It was when Alex was going back to work after having had Charlie. And whilst I'd been doing plenty whilst that was the case, whilst she'd been on maternity leave, it'd probably been a case of just floating everything through. I decided with her going back and Charlie starting in nursery, it was time to level up a little bit. So I signed up for that Unstoppable program, which I'm still part of. And as part of that, you set goals every quarter. And so it would have been towards the end of last year, I was looking at my goals for the first quarter of 2020. Realised obviously I was going to be turning 40 7 weeks into the year, and I decided to get in the best shape of my life from an aesthetic point of view anyway. Don't quite know really why I particularly made that specific decision. I think maybe it seemed sometimes a big audacious goal is one you can actually get your teeth into a little bit more. You know, something that's a bit more easy to achieve doesn't necessarily grab you and inspire you in quite the same way. But I thought, I don't think so, but maybe it was. I don't know if people know they have a midlife crisis, do they? As midlife crisis goes, it's better than buying a Lamborghini and having an affair, I suppose.
Absolutely.
I did that as well. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's very different. So I think I set the goal. Kind of worked out how long I'd got to do that. As part of that, to give you guys complete credit, I'd started training with you guys there probably a few months before, but that definitely gave me a lot more focus on my training. I completely handed over the design of what we were doing to your app on your phone, because I knew if I started setting my own programs, I'd just sink back into the stuff that I found most comfortable and easiest to do, which has got me so far. I was in perfectly fine shape before, but I knew that by doing that, it wouldn't really massively improve where I was at. By following that app on your phone, it made me do stuff that I wouldn't normally do. And
you never moaned or complained about
not once.
Not a word. No,
never.
No, just willing to do everything.
Yeah, I was always happy. All those squats, just a smile on my face. I got on with them, didn't I?
One more. Good times.
I also took on a nutrition coach, a guy called Dan that I used to know from my wrestling days. He lived in, well, he still lives in Sheffield now, but he was a student at Sheffield Uni, and I wrestled with him a number of times. I think he may have stopped wrestling for several years in the meantime, but he is back wrestling now. And whilst always in reasonable shape when I used to know him, he'd got in phenomenal shape over the last few years. And I'd seen on Facebook that he did a nutrition program. So I messaged him one day asking about it. And Dan and I have a bit of a banter-filled relationship, a bit like we do, where most of the messages we send each other are somewhat abusive and potentially offensive. And I think to start with, he just thought I was taking the mickey. I actually had to spell it out. I wanted to do his program, and I was willing to pay for it before he actually took me on and doing it. And nothing particularly. I never expected not to learn anything from it. It wasn't my intention that I was doing it to learn anything. I was doing it for the accountability. It explained that as part of it, I had to track my food, which I've done periodically over the years, but never massively felt the need to do it for a sustained period of time. I had to track it and submit screen grabs to him on a Sunday evening. So when we finish this in a minute and I've had my tea, I'll submit my food for this last week to him. And I knew that level of accountability and extra bit of knowledge and pointers and direction would help, which it definitely did. So I think with the combination of the more focused training, probably longer workouts, probably pushing myself harder than I would do normally. You know, I've always pushed myself reasonably hard, but again, when you train with people, you push yourself a bit harder. And then the more focus on my diet meant that I'd like to think, like on my 40th birthday, I was in the best shape, at least aesthetically, of my life.
Yeah, it looks all right.
No, it was great to watch. Well, that was a brief history of Jon. Well, 47 minutes. So I'll pass over to Jamie now for some more general questioning.
Yeah, so there's some questions obviously from some of the members, and there's some that kind of mainly have kind of put together as well.
I bet.
We'll do no, not them ones. We'll do it in a bit of a rapid fire style, and then that gives us a bit of time, I suppose, towards the end if you want to go into stuff. So, okay, so the first one, if you won the lottery, what would be the first thing that you would treat yourself to? Not family, not anybody else around you. What would you do if you had millions and millions of pounds in your bank account? Yeah, what would be the first thing that you treat yourself to?
Can I do it with the family?
No, it's got to be you.
No idea. Can't think of anything.
No idea. No.
I genuinely can't think of anything. I'd want to do something with the family.
Oh, go on then. What would you do with the family then? Open it out.
If something like that, or a holiday, I suppose, if we were allowed out. We're obviously not at the moment. Just some fun experiences. Go somewhere perhaps that we haven't been able to justify the cost of previously. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Experiences.
Yeah,
cool.
Always.
Okay, next one. What thing scares you the most?
Death. Petrified of death.
Petrified
scares the hell out of me.
Not spiders, no.
Nothing in terms of. I have healthy respect. You know, if a tiger walked into the room now, I'd jump and get the hell out of there. But I don't lie awake at night stressing about tigers or if they're on TV, I'd just look at it and think that's pretty. If a snake came in now again, I'd jump up on the desk. I'm not an idiot. But I don't have a particular phobia, whereas death scares the shit out of me.
Cool, excellent. Okay, what do you think? I mean, we probably heard a bit about it then, but what do you think's been one of your biggest regrets so far? If you could go back and change something, what would you do?
Looking back now, and I wouldn't say regrets. I don't really think I regret anything. Things
you've done something different. Yeah,
I'd probably take on coaching for my own physique and everything much earlier. You know, in theory, I got in the best shape of my life, age 40, with injuries and 4 kids and all this other stuff going on, when actually it didn't matter in the slightest. If I'd been able to do that when I was 25 and trying to make my way in the world of professional wrestling, it probably would have made a lot more sense. And I probably would have done that if I'd taken on, you know, for example, Ollie Foster, who's a world-renowned PT now. He works in London, multiple-time men's health cover model. He was a personal trainer at Fitness First Millhouse at the same time as me. He's a good friend of mine. And he was in phenomenal shape at that point. If I'd have paid Ollie for a session or two a week, I probably would have got in a lot better shape at that age than I was. So maybe that. Nothing than that. I mean, you could always look at particular things. Like I've got numerous injuries, some of which are wear and tear, some of which are very specific things that happen. So I could think I wouldn't climb up that ladder. I wouldn't take that pile driver from Julio in Skegness. Couldn't feel my arms for about 5 minutes afterwards, that one. And there are a few things like that. In theory, if I hadn't have done those, I probably would have been quite a lot less pain now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. Kind of the flip side to that. What's the thing you are most proud of for the minute? Obviously, there's going to be
the kids. The kids.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, they make me proud. The stuff they do. All four of them. Ollie, with his growing confidence and his ability, started working out regularly recently, which I really like to see. He asks me to teach him stuff to do with exercise, to have workouts with him. The other day we had a workout in the lounge. I just set a 10-minute AMRAP for us to do together, which I really enjoyed. I'm proud when he pushes himself onwards. He has a bit less confidence perhaps than the others, and that can get more easily knocked. So I can see when he is pushing himself and trying things he finds difficult. Izzy at the moment doing really well at school. Got an email from the school the other day to say that she was an example of one of the kids that have been doing best under this sort of lockdown homeschooling. She was always a pleasure. She's always there when she needs to be on Microsoft Teams calls and does all the work and doing really well. Jamie, great little boy, phenomenal sportsman, does really well, really likeable, lovely boy. Charlie, doing fantastically. I suppose one thing actually that really makes me proud is when I hear from other parents. So whenever they go to parties or anything like that and they come back, every single time, all the parents say what nice, lovely, well-behaved, polite children they are. Yeah. And every single time that makes me proud.
Yeah, good. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, totally agree with that. Okay, so what about the academy then? Do you think you'll ever expand the academy beyond what it is today? So do you think you'll ever grow it outside of Macclesfield, take the brand and
I've got some plans actually. There's some plans afoot. There's some stuff that was always going to happen, completely irrespective of this lockdown situation. There's been some things that this has made me realise. I don't know if necessarily saying expanding is the right word, but there's some plans for the next evolution, shall we say? It will become clear
That's
soon.
all we can say.
That's all I'm going to say for now.
We keep trying, but you can't get anything out of it. Okay, so looking back at your 20s, where did you see yourself at this age? Where, if you were to go back and speak to yourself in your 20s, what do you think you'd expect you'd be at this point?
Probably, roughly, where I am now, I'd have thought. I always thought I'd have kids. I always wanted family. So if you'd have told me age 40, I'd have a good, thriving business that helps a lot of people make significant changes in their lives. I'd have 4 lovely kids, a beautiful wife, nice house, plenty of friends. That'd have been exactly what I'd have wanted.
Yeah, excellent. Good stuff. And kind of looking forward then, what that age-old question, where do you see yourself, yourself personally, where do you see yourself in the next 10, 20 years or so?
Well, I've got a 10-year plan, actually. Again, this has been edited somewhat or affected by the current situation, but around the time of my 40th birthday, I started to think a bit about, you start to ruminate, don't you, and think, what have you done and where you're going to go? And I've got a particular plan of something that I want to achieve in my 40s, which will become clear soon as well. Mm-hmm. In terms of where, Alex and I have had this conversation several times. Whilst we're not planning specifically on living in Mac for the rest of our lives, we're kind of at the point now where I can't really see what would take us away. Izzy's in school here. Ollie and Jamie go to schools near Bakewell because they're based there half the week, but Charlie will soon be in school here. So unless there's a very specific reason to relocate, we won't feel the need to leave the friendships that we've got here, to drag the kids out of school. So in theory, that's us in Mac until Charlie's 18, nearly 19, which is another, 15 and a bit years. So never say never, but I should imagine we'll be based around here, doing similar sort of stuff, but just, next level-ish.
Next level, yeah. Cool. Okay. And with 4 children, a dog, early starts, the business, everything that you've got, do you ever get time just for yourself?
I don't really want time just for myself.
Other than when you have little naps and stuff like that, which I
do like. What's that?
Hey?
Is that one for me? I don't have 4 kids and 2 dogs in the business. Sorry.
At least he's got an extra dog. Look at him. I don't really want much time for myself, to be honest. They're all things that I enjoy doing, value doing, like doing. I don't really want much time for myself.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And probably the final one, just conscious of time. What insecurities do you have?
Well, I saw that someone posted that in the Facebook group earlier, haven't they?
Yeah.
From an aesthetic perspective, I think because I was fat when I was younger, I don't think my body looks like it should do when, according to the in-body machine in the academy, I'm 3% body fat. Now, I don't think that's actually accurate. But even if it is, I don't look as tight as like you might expect. If you see like a physique athlete at 3%, then there's literally nothing on them. I think I'm still a bit loose and what have you. I don't think I look quite as I should do. I should, but expected to at that level of body fat. So even now when I take my shirt off if I'm on the beach, I'm aware that I don't look quite as I'd ideally like to, but I look okay. I'm not beating myself up over it. I don't like my nipples. Never have liked my nipples. They're bigger than I would like. They're like when I used to wrestle regularly, the lads would take the piss out of it all the time. Honestly, that was a regular source of amusement. My nipples were.
Oh, I'm so glad I know that.
Yeah.
We are still on that Zoom call, aren't we? We're not on a private chat now, are we? We're on that Zoom.
We are, aren't we? Yeah. I've already
just said that.
I put that on videos before. That's
never heard you mention that ever.
That's been on the videos before. My legs, I'd like my legs to be a bit bigger. They're not the most impressive of legs.
Not very long either, are they?
What's that?
Not very long.
Not very tall, are you?
No. Wide it would be nice. My hair, like when I lean forward now, it's starting to thin a little bit. It's all right, but I don't really like it. I appreciate that it's going in a direction that I don't want it to go into. My dad was probably reasonably bored by the time he was my age. Maybe not. He was definitely going far more that direction. So I'm hoping that my granddad, my mum's dad's full head of hair until the day he died is going to help me out a little bit. But I'm aware that perhaps my hair is not what it was and will only get worse. I don't massively like that either. Even just looking now at the screen now, the bags under the eyes, the wrinkles that weren't there 5-10 years ago. I wouldn't necessarily say they're insecurities, but the bits of myself.
Now you've kind of mentioned it. There's a bit of a glare coming off that screen at the minute from the top of your head. So
that's the light. I promise you, it's the light.
Cool.
Alex,
okay, cool.
Alex says you have lovely nipples, by the way, John.
That's very kind of her. Thank you, Alex. That's my wife, Alex, isn't it? Not like one of the members or.
Yes. Sorry, Jamie.
Cool. No, I think that's it. I know there's one more there. So, is there one thing that you do every day that's for your health and that you'd recommend to everybody? What one thing would you recommend?
One thing I do every day
that you do, yeah.
No, I don't know about recommending per se, 'cause it's about everyone finding their own journey and whatever. But stuff I do every day. I exercise every day. Now, what that exercise is varies dependent on what else I've done and what body parts need working, how much energy I've got, how much time I've got, and what have you. But I find it much easier just to exercise every day, and rather than it being a case of shall I exercise or not, it's more a case of what shall I or can I do. So seeing exercise is just a daily habit. I've continued tracking my food now, so I've stayed actually on that program with that guy Dan. I was tempted to stop afterwards, but then I thought, actually, I've got in the best shape of my life by following this program. Why would I stop? So I do track my food. Finds it gives me that extra bit of accountability. Just makes you question a few of your food choices. As I often say in blogs and videos, it's a bit of a pain in the arse, but it's not that much. It's 30 or 60 seconds while I'm preparing a meal anyway, and I think it just keeps me enough. I don't think without it, I'd go back to roughly the shape I was in before, which was still not bad shape, but I definitely would regress a little bit. So I'm going to keep doing that. not saying for the rest of my life, but I don't see any massive reason to stop when it's working for me. And I know from experience that does work for other people when they try it as well.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Yeah, that's most of those questions. So
some Facebook stuff.
I can't see it.
Like.
Yeah, I can't see anything on
Facebook. On the video. Number of people watching. Leanne mentions blooming good A levels.
Yeah, they're all right. The 2 E's were disappointing.
Well, Mark Bowers also used to watch wrestling as a kid. Used to watch World of Sport with Grandad eating jelly babies. So
I tell you what, my one regret in wrestling. Pink
shorts?
No, I love the pink shorts. The pink shorts are over here somewhere. They're in a box on the wall over there somewhere.
Come on, they are the trunk.
I love those shorts. They were quality. The pink and black ones I used to wear when I was a bad guy. I'd got the red and blue ones, Superman colours, for when I was a good guy. Pink and black when I was a bad guy. Then the last couple of years, I just started wearing the pink and black all the time because they looked awesome. But probably the one slight regret, there was a wrestler called Johnny Saint, who, Mark, you'll probably remember him from being on World of Sport. He was the light heavyweight champion for many years, from the 60s through to the 80s. Retired in, I think it was something like 1991. But then in the late 2000s, maybe like 2008, 2009, he made a bit of a comeback. He was like 70 at that point. And then one day, I think someone had said they'd left me a voicemail on my phone. I said, I haven't had a notification. Rang my voicemail up, and I got like 5 voicemails, one of which was from Brian, the promoter I used to work for regularly, saying, got a match for you this weekend in wherever it was. I think it might have even been Stoke, you and Johnny Saint. And I remember my dad saying that he'd like Johnny Saint, watching him on TV. So I rang Brian back all excited, going, hey, I could do it. And because he'd not heard back from me, he'd put someone else on. For whatever reason, my phone didn't give me the voicemail notification, so I missed out on that. So that's maybe a bit of a regret. That's someone my dad had watched on TV when he was younger, and I was could have in theory wrestled him fairly close to where my dad lived.
So was that because you had a rubbish phone back then as well, or?
What do you mean back then? That suggests I've got a rubbish phone now.
No comment.
Probably the whatever was a reasonably good phone at the time. I can't remember. It wouldn't have been a smartphone back then, but it would have been good enough.
Motorola, probably.
So Leanne mentions,
something like
that. Which I agree with as well. She loved watching your wrestling a few years ago at Macclesfield Centre. I went along to that with my boys. Your comeback.
Did two big ones at Macclesfield Centre actually. I think Leanne might have come to both. The one in 2014, you guys, was my last one as a regular, and then I did a one-off comeback in 2017, which I mainly did actually so the kids could come and watch and be old enough to remember. The one in 2014, they were 4, 4, and 6 at that point. Yeah. The one in 2017, they would have been 7, 7, and 9. But unfortunately, Ollie and Jamie last minute couldn't come. Their auntie on the other side was really seriously unwell. Thankfully, she was all right in the end, but they went to see her instead. So that probably means I've got to do one more at some point. Because I do.
And there's a thought that anyway, wasn't there, doing one in your 40s?
Yeah. I'm not necessarily that bothered per se. I mean, it probably will be, well, definitely will be one of my 40s because I'm in my 40s now. That was just perhaps something I mentioned in passing, but I think I will do one more at some point so the kids can come and watch and remember it forever.
Brilliant. Mark mentions the glamorous locations involved in wrestling.
So I've been to all the funny thing is, the bigger the dump, the better the crowd, honestly. Barrow in Furness, you'd have like a couple of thousand there and they'd be screaming, they'd love it. I did one in Lincoln once, and I kid you not, I don't think anyone in Lincoln realised that there's a reason that wrestling isn't in the Olympics. They were there banging on the side of the ring, swinging handbags round. Honestly, it was mental. They're loving it.
I love that. Alex, a new car would be fine. I'm assuming Alex is talking about the lottery question. Maybe suggesting
if I win the lottery, I'll buy you a new car.
Mark agrees that death is the thing that scares him too. Leanne talks about when you were teaching Hayden how to backflip.
I've taught loads of people how to backflip. Hayden is Leanne's son, who is now going to be 14 now. Yes, 14. A few years ago, when he, I guess, would have been about 11, we were around at theirs for a barbecue. I think at that point I'd already taught. I think I taught my Ollie how to backflip on a trampoline at that point. Darren, who's a friend of ours, his Jacob taught how to backflip, and a few others. And I think Hayden had heard that and asked if I could show him how to backflip on their trampoline, which he very quickly got the hang of it because he's a very high level athlete. Hayden, he runs and does other athletic stuff at definitely North of England level. I think he's like pushing on for national level now. So he got it straight away. To be honest, I can't take much credit for teaching him that.
Well, for instance, he then won gold in North of England under 13 athletics for high jump.
Coincidence, eh?
And what else? Yeah, lovely nipples.
A lot of nipple comments.
Just all about the nipples.
Always all about the nipples.
Pink shorts. And yes, Leanne came to both. That's it for comments at the moment. So.
Any other questions? Anything you think I've missed out? Anything I've glossed over or gone over too quickly?
Anything you feel like we've missed out asking?
Just to recap, I've probably not spoken as much about the academy as I could have done, because obviously that's been a massive part of the last 8 years of my life. After the kids, probably the academy is the thing that I'm most proud of next. It always really touches me when I hear people's stories of the things that have changed in their lives since they've been coming there, increasing confidence. I mean, I've had probably, I'd estimate 20 people tell me over the years that if they hadn't joined the academy, they'd have killed themselves in the end. And when they tell me that, I'm like, I'm about to swear there, but that what you like, you start to choke up straight away with that. There's kids that have been born because of the academy, marriages that have happened because of it, people's lives that have been changed. So I'm massively proud of everything that we've done there.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's massive. It's massive impact on my life particularly.
I do like when you take credit for babies being born. I know you tried to take somewhat credit for Lucy being born in our house.
Just a little bit. You tried to take credit for Charlie being born. You know, you just joined the. In fact, she was already pregnant when you joined the academy, and yet you tried to take credit for it.
I'll go there. So no, that's all from me. Jane's just asked you to, which I know you won't, but she wants you to expand on the. You talk about the expansion of the academy, asking maybe if you'd consider another branch outside of Macclesfield.
All will be revealed in time.
Yeah.
There's some exciting stuff going down at the academy at the moment, which a select few people know about. There's some stuff going on. You may have seen the videos I put on. Some of it, which again was always going to happen. Some of which has been brought about by the current, lockdown situation. Some of which is just stuff I wanted to do to level up what we were doing. Some of which is particularly to help make people as safe as possible. So whenever we're allowed back in the building, I want there to be nowhere safer in the Macclesfield area. Nowhere that people can go where they stand a lower chance of anything bad happening. Yeah. So I'm doing everything I can down there from both a structural and a logistical perspective to make that happen. I want people to have confidence that they can come back, and it won't be the same as it was before, because logistically we just won't be able to run it exactly like it was before, but it'll be, I was about to say the next best thing. It's going to be better. To be honest, it's going to be better, but different.
Yeah. Brilliant. We've got a few more comments. So Alex says she's loved listening to you. I'm surprised she's not sick of your voice, to be honest.
She is.
Yeah. She says you're an amazing husband, best dad and stepdad.
Nice. Oh, don't you'll start crying.
I do cry. I cry a lot. Since I've had kids, I cry a lot more at stuff than I probably didn't cry at anything. Yeah. I reckon between the age of 13, 14 and having Ollie, I probably cried at my uncle and my grandpa's and granny's funerals. That was probably it. And then the last nearly 12 years, I cry in every other day probably. Yeah.
Leanne mentioned everyone's so focused. Feels like a place to belong, which is nice. Your mum's jumped on. onto the lottery question. Saying you could buy her a hot tub.
I could, yeah. If I
Of
won,
course, the
literally, if I
question,
won
generally
millions
speaking,
and
the question is, what would you
millions,
buy yourself?
yeah, if I won millions and millions, I'd give an amount to. But I only had a conversation about this today, actually, talking to the kids over dinner about values and what you value and how there's no right or wrong, but different people value different things. Because I think the boys have been talking about, Tesla cars, and I said I just couldn't ever bring myself to spend that much money on a car. If I had that much money, I'd buy a 50 grand car, which would still be a very nice car, and give 50 grand each to my nephews and nieces or something like that, just because I don't value that kind of stuff that much.
Yeah. Okay. Alex is telling your mum to get in the queue.
But actually, if we actually win the lottery, if I win like 10 million, you can all have a hot tub.
Hot tubs all round.
Yeah.
Jane's pushing for a Congleton branch of the academy.
Congleton? Which Jane? Monroe?
Jane Bibby.
Ah, right. Of course. Yeah, I've just seen it now. Scroll down. Congleton. We'll see.
That's a no, Jane.
Well, there's plans before other clubs. I'm not even saying that we're doing other clubs. There's other stuff going on long before we look at other clubs.
I think now, I don't know what's going on here now. Maybe we'll talk about some sort of crowdfunding to get any more hot tub. I don't know where this is going now. Nipples, pink trunks, and hot tubs.
Pretty much sums me up.
That's pretty much sums him up.
Yeah. What more do you need?
That's the title to his autobiography.
Did you get the questions that I sent you over on Messenger, the ones that come through on email? Have we covered them? I can't remember.
So what?
Oh yeah, so Leon was asking what career you had in mind when you entered university.
Yeah, I think I said that some sort of engineering type thing. 3M Innovations, I seem to remember, as I said before, were the kind of company I thought that I might end up working for. I'm glad I didn't, though, to be honest. I don't think... Sometimes in life you don't always, I don't know, you perhaps don't know what would have happened otherwise. So like a lot of my friends from uni earn a hell of a lot more than I do. They'll have been earning 20, 30 grand a year more per year for the best part of the last 20 years. So my decision to do what I did, in theory, compared to what I could have done, has cost me a lot financially, but it's gained in so many other ways. Some of my friends from uni, I see them, they're not happy, not enjoying life. I remember a handful of years ago, we were out in Mac actually with some of the members at the time, and one of them introduced me to his friend. He said, "John, you've got to meet my friend Jon. He's just like you." And Jon was almost like the mirror of what I could have been. I think we worked out we were only a month apart in age. Jon, Jon, looked a bit like me, but was like 5 stone overweight and absolutely miserable. And I remember thinking that could have been the path that I'd have potentially followed.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just reread through those questions, and yeah, Jamie covered those.
Cool. I think we've probably covered everything then. So, guys, well, firstly, Jamie and Lee, thank you for interviewing me tonight on the podcast. I hope you guys listening enjoyed that. I think I probably covered everything. Probably some things less than I could have done, some things more than perhaps I should have done. A few bits of overly revealing information there. I hope you enjoyed it.
We'll find out soon enough. We're gonna get it out of him. I'm telling you.
That'll come later on. In terms of stuff coming up, the next social is the GTP live session tomorrow. It would normally be the 7 p.m. one, but because it's bank holiday, we're just running the 9:30 a.m. one. I am running it from the academy. I'm going to be passing anyway. I'm doing my shopping. I'm going to have a workout, and I'm going to take the session from the academy 9:30 tomorrow morning. So it'll be the first time a GTP session has been run from the academy in over 2 months. I'd really like to get as many people as possible on that. I'd like to set a record for what we've got in terms of how many people make that session, both from members, and obviously it is public facing, so anyone else can join in that one as well if they like. Next weekend will be the podcast again, but then the weekend after that on the Saturday, we've got the Rise 1000 event. So we're getting there, but there's still a distance to go to get 1,000 people involved. But really, all you have to do is all get 5 friends, well, not even that, four friends each involved in it, and we'll be there. We are going to be in the Mac Express this week about it as well, which is quite exciting. So even if I don't hit the 1,000, which I'm fully planning on doing, I'd like to get as close as humanly possible. If you want more information about that, just go to theacademygtc.co.uk/rise. And that's it. Thanks again for your time this evening, Jamie and Lee, and for everyone listening at home.
Thank you.
No problem at all.